Hi, in this lecture, I'm going to discuss and describe social research methods. I'll provide a brief overview and give examples of 4 different types of ways of collecting social science data, 4 different types of research methods that are used in the social sciences. We'll begin by describing what social research is. Social research refers to the process of forming questions about the social world and using different systematic manners to answer those questions with empirical data. Social research, there's sort of 2 things that distinguish social research from other types of research methods. The first is that social research involves people and it concerns social phenomena, group behavior. For example, protests and other social movements would be examples of a social phenomena. There are 2 real important reasons about why it would be important to learn research methods, learn about social research methods. The first is that you'll become a better consumer of information about studies that are described. For instance, in the news media, every day there are news and press releases about studies that are conducted by people in the United States and the wider world. By learning social research methods, much of this research concerns people. And so if you learn about social research, you'll be a better consumer of information about these studies. You'll be able to identify the types of methods that the researchers used to study the social phenomena, and you'll be able to sort of evaluate the conclusions that they made about the populations that they studied. Second, you'll actually be able to produce your own independent research. You'll be a producer of research evidence. So you'll have an understanding of how to form research questions, how to review available scientific literature, examining topics that maybe that people have studied before, so you'll be able to review articles and books and read through those texts in a manner that will kind of help you understand what previous work has been done on the topic that you want to study. You'll be able to identify the types of appropriate methods to use to answer the questions that you posed. You'll be able to analyze data. And finally, you'll be able to sort of discuss the implications of the findings from your research and how they sort of relate to prior literature and maybe lead you to produce new theories about the social world. And even propose new research questions for future researchers to examine. So in short, learning social research is important because you'll be able to consume information about research, and you'll also be potentially able to produce your own independent research. There are many issues that social scientists study. In sociology, a few examples of social research that's been conducted recently. One example of a study was done by the sociologist Matthew Desmond at Princeton University. And he followed, over several years, he followed 8 poor Milwaukee families as they underwent the process of eviction. So they were forced from their home because they were unable to make rent payments or for sometimes other reasons. So he was able to sort of pose and answer questions about how common eviction is in urban areas and the toll that it takes on people. A second example of social research was done by Ken Ferraro and his colleagues. And they looked at how socioeconomic disadvantage in childhood was related to health problems and lifestyle risks in middle and later adulthood. And these researchers used survey data collected at 2 points in times, and they related measures of childhood socioeconomic disadvantage in one survey administered at an earlier point in time to later data collected on a second survey in which they were able to relate childhood socioeconomic disadvantage with adulthood social resources and health. So what I want to do is describe 4 types of methodological approaches that are used to collect data that will enable you to answer questions about the social world. And these include survey research, field research, available data, and finally experiments. So I'll give kind of a description of each of these methods and give you an example of each technique. Survey research is very common in the social sciences, and what survey research involves is the administration of standardized questionnaires, usually that include a relatively large number of close-ended, fixed-response questions that are administered to large groups of people. It's not uncommon for survey researchers to study hundreds, thousands of people, hundreds if not thousands of people. And what this enables you to do, if the group of people that you administered your survey to are similar in their demographic characteristics, their gender, their age, their education, to the population that you're studying, is that you can use data and analysis of the survey that you collected to sort of make inferences about the wider population that you're interested in. So if you kind of randomly survey people across the United States and your survey is similar to the wider U.S. population in terms of its demographics, you can make inferences from your survey about trends in the American population. Survey research is often descriptive, so you can describe the frequencies of certain population characteristics. You can characterize information about demographic characteristics, education, income, people's employment. You can also, what's really interesting about survey research is that you can relate measures to one another. So if you collect information on attitudes and beliefs, in addition to characteristics related to people's demographics like age, gender, or education, you can relate those measures to one another. So you can look at how education influences political beliefs, how age is related to measures of health status. So you can relate X to Y. So survey measures can be related to one another, and they can also be examined across time if you ask the same questions over multiple surveys. One interesting example of a survey research study was conducted by Kristen Munch, and she used data from 9,000 people who responded to a large national survey called the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth that was administered for the first time in 1997. And it was a longitudinal survey, so these people who were studied were followed over time and asked to respond to questionnaires at later points in time. And what she did is she looked at how the odds of marital infidelity varied between men and women with different levels of relative income. And relative income refers to the one spouse's income as it relates to another spouse's income. So if one spouse is earning more than another, that would be the spouse who is earning more would be a breadwinner. And she found she looked at how the relationship between relative income and marital infidelity varied between men and women. And what she found is that as women's relative income rises, so when they became breadwinners in their families, the odds of marital infidelity decreased. But the opposite was true for men. When men were the breadwinners, their odds of marital infidelity actually increased. So there was kind of the opposite relationship between genders. And this kind of had interesting implications, and it was discussed in the context of gender theory and prior research. So this is a very creative way to use survey data. The second type of social research method is field research. And in field research, you are immersing yourself in a naturally occurring setting to really gain first-hand knowledge of the social phenomena within that environment. And the researcher is really kind of standing back without influencing the shape or the content of social behavior. And they're gathering data through informal observations, participation in activities, and conversations with people within that setting. So the data that's produced from field research can include the person's accounts of events, extended quotes from interviews, and these data provide very rich descriptions of social life. So an example of field research was the study by Matthew Desmond, where he followed the Milwaukee families as they were undergoing the process of eviction. And what this enabled him to do is provide a very rich and thick description of the eviction process and the toll that it took on families and the implications it had for their lives. But field research is actually quite difficult because you need to select the right setting. You need to select an appropriate setting, and also you need to gain access to that setting in the sense of people have to sort of be comfortable with your presence, with you studying them, and you also have to have a rapport with the participants and gain their trust. The other challenging thing about field research is that many field researchers immerse themselves within a social setting for a year or more. It's not uncommon for an ethnographer to immerse themselves in a setting for 4 or 5 years. So that produces a lot of data. And in order to sort of synthesize and distill that data into something that can be shared through an article or a book, it takes a lot of organization and distilling and analyzing data, a lot of decisions about how to organize and analyze that data, and to produce something that's kind of coherent and tells a meaningful story in a systematic and coherent way. One example of field research was an ethnography conducted by the anthropologist Karen Ho. And she studied Wall Street, and Wall Street represents a collection of international financial institutions, mainly located in New York City, in Lower Manhattan and Midtown Manhattan. And she studied the people who comprise these institutions. So she studied investment bankers. And Karen Ho actually worked in the investment banking industry herself. And she was, through her interviews and observations of the people who worked within this industry, was able to provide insights into the culture of Wall Street, what it's like to actually work for one of these firms, how people sort of interpret the world, how they view their place within the world. And she provided very rich descriptions of interactions and events. So it's a great example of field research. Another technique that social scientists use to answer research questions is available data. Available data are kind of interesting because they're not necessarily, it's not information that's gathered for the purposes of research. So when you're using available data, that data was usually generated for purposes other than those the researcher is using them for. One example of this would be medical claims. When you go to the doctor or a hospital or another clinic, they are collecting information about your demographic characteristics, your history of disease, and that information is stored in an electronic format. And researchers have actually used medical claims data to produce knowledge about how different patient characteristics are related to healthcare outcomes. But that data was not necessarily produced for the intention of that research, but it was used nevertheless. So available data can include things like medical claims, but it can also include historical documents, reports in the news, and more recently, data that's produced through our interactions with social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google. Researchers really have to sort of decide how to collect that data, how to get access to it. Oftentimes, it produces large volumes of information. So how do you kind of extract that data, code it in a systematic manner? Sometimes there are also questions about the authenticity of the data, the accuracy of the data. So when you're using available data, you have to see how well it fits your purposes and whether it is authentic and accurate, as those are issues that often arise with that type of available data. I have 2 examples of how to use available data in research. In one study, the sociologist Jerome Karabel actually used historical documents and correspondence between university administrators to examine the history of selective admissions and at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton universities. And what he was able to do through his analysis of these historical documents and correspondence is uncover practices of social exclusion that barred certain social groups from admission into these universities and restricted admission to certain people with certain social backgrounds and characteristics. Another more recent example of using available data was a study by Robin Dwyer and Suzanne Frazier, where they actually gathered tweets from Twitter using the hashtags addiction, addicted, and addict to examine the ways that addiction is talked about and articulated by social media users. And they identified different ways that people represent addiction in their talk. Formal ways comparing it to drug or alcohol abuse, destabilizing addiction, and remaking addiction, sort of providing new insights into how people use and talk about addiction on social media platforms and construct a concept about addiction. A final type of social research method that's commonly used in the social sciences are experiments. And experiments are really best suited when you want to examine the causes of social phenomena. Surveys and observations are often insufficient to produce causal evidence that X leads to Y. And why experiments are better suited for investigating the causes of social phenomena is that you are able to sort of systematically manipulate a specific condition that people are exposed to. And they allow you to sort of hold constant other confounding factors that might provide alternative explanations. And so you study a population that are sort of randomized into an experimental and a control group. While the experimental group is exposed to the condition, the control group is not. But they both receive like a pre and a post measures, and you can compare those measures to see how the manipulated condition affects subjects in the experimental group as compared to the control group. An example of an experiment was a study by Adler and Wall, in which they wanted to really understand how children respond to stories about people who have a mental illness. And in this experiment, children were randomly assigned to one of three groups, and they were told stories about someone who was either mentally ill, physically disabled, or a regular grown-up adult without a specific label. And they found that, and so they just manipulated the description of that person, and they found that children had more negative attitudes and expectations when the stories included that label of a mental illness.